Well, good morning, Vietnam. Well, that was a statement that was given by Robin Williams in the 1987 movie Good Morning, Vietnam. And although they did not really want to be in Vietnam, and they did not enjoy the conditions there, however, they found a way to compromise and a way to manage that situation because they had to be there. And so, as this morning, as I give my presentation, it kind of ties right in because when you have a situation or a conflict, you can motivate yourself and be able to overcome the desire to leave that place. Well, let's try it all together. Good morning, Vietnam. Okay, now I hope you feel better about the place that you're in. So my name is Joseph King. I'm going to be covering the last portion of chapter 8. I am with group number 2, and I'll be covering key concepts number 5 and 6. Key concept number 5 is how can communication help build common ground among people who are different? Well, how can it be done? It can be done by managing dialectical tensions. Dialectical tensions. What are dialectical tensions? They are ongoing changing needs that are often opposite or contradictory. Okay, an example would be parents can both love to be with their children as well as to have their own privacy away from the children. So as life goes on, the dynamics of tension may change in how the parents work their relationship and their time together in the relationship with their children. So let's talk about managing dialectical tensions. There's autonomy and there is connection. Autonomy is like the need to be alone or to have your private time. Connection is the need to have relationship. So you have independence and you have relationship. And although these tensions are in some ways irreconcilable, yet they can be managed. How? They can be managed through one, selection, separation, neutralization, and reframing. Well, now that we have an idea of how we can manage these tensions, let's go right into selection. So as we talk about selection, it requires a focus on one need, while suppressing or ignoring the other need to manage the tensions. So let me give you that example about the parents again. So parents feel the need to be with their children. They also feel the need to have their own personal quiet time. Well, yet they will often suppress their private and quality time for the sake of their children. So there's a selection process that's done there. Secondly would be separation, another alternative to managing the tension. So separation is another alternative. It helps meet both needs, but separately. So how does this happen? Let me give you an example. A newlywed couple asked their parents to not to visit unexpectedly. So that ties in with the autonomy part. Yet they coordinate a schedule to visit their parents or have their parents visit them to meet both parties' needs. Yet they separate the two so that they can deconflict or better manage the tensions in that relationship and both parties are satisfied. Thirdly, there's neutralization. Well, compromise and accommodation. To acknowledge the other person's unique needs and tolerate the differences. This is where you kind of got to dig down and look inside. So compromise is not always ideal, but it makes for a workable way of managing hard to solve conflict. An example would be, say you are a student in college and you have a roommate. Well, you study, and most of the millennial folks nowadays, they study, they listen to music, watch TV all at the same time. But your roommate has the practice of studying in quiet. So here, there has to be a compromise. Maybe you could do music and study one day, and then it's quiet the next day. However, but there's a sense of compromise to neutralize the situation. Then there's reframing. This one takes more time. It takes a lot more effort to redefine how you see the situation, how you see the tension in the relationship. So an example here would be a couple can learn to see time apart from each other where they love to be together. It's important to them. However, because of circumstances or situations, they are apart. Instead of looking at that time of being apart negatively, let's look at it positively and utilize that as when we do get together, we can intensify our time together. So that's reframing and looking at it in a different way. So now that we have an idea of how we can deal with dialectical tensions, let's transition now into what are the last point, which is what are some of the important steps to remember in trying to resolve conflict. Well, there were several of them, but I'm just going to point out a few of them today. So the first thing we want to do is look at what are the important steps to remember when trying to resolve conflict. Creating common ground from conflict. All communication begin with relationships. The quality of the relationship and the climate determines how the conflict is handled. There was a concept that was in our chapter here, identified as communication climate. And basically that is the way people feel about their interactions with others. Well, let's move right on into some of the ways that we can deal with conflict. We should remember some of these. First of all, be sure the timing is right. Well, when your wife comes home and she had a bad day, that might not be the best time to address a particular situation. Then secondly, try to focus on current behaviors. Don't get stuck on past conflicts and past attitudes and past behaviors. Let's look at the behaviors of today. There's the focus on strengths as well as weaknesses. A rational discussion of ideas often open lines for communication and common grounds in conflict. Well, we also want to search for a solution that satisfies the needs of everyone involved. We don't want to be selfish in this process. So look for common needs and interests, then generate new ideas that go beyond the original disagreement, and look for how we can do this instead of being stuck with why we can't move forward. Well, we've covered key concepts number 5 and number 6 of chapter 8, and during that process these were the items that I have addressed. One was how can conflict be valuable, some common sources of conflict, different ways of handling conflict, managing had a little technical difficulty there. Managing a conflict. And so that covers our chapter 8. Well, one thing I want to say in final closing is that as we look to build common ground in relationships, let's remember strategies we discussed here today. And in our efforts to reconcile or deconflict tensions that are unhealthy for all involved in the relationship, I believe that practicing these strategies will make for a great relationship together. So if there's no further questions, this concludes Group 2's presentation. Thank you.